And on Power Talk this week, we are pleased to have Allan Kilavuka, who's the MD and CEO of Kenya Airways, the national carrier. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Nice being here too. Thank you.
So let's talk about your numbers for the first half of 2023. We're calling it a profit and loss. Speak to us about the performance of the national carrier for the first half of this year.
Thank you, Yvonne. So let me tell you, we are very excited because we operationally, for the first time in more than 6 years, we've made an operating profit of close to 1 billion Kenya shillings. What that demonstrates is that the business is viable. And this coming on the back of a long COVID period, the effects and impact of COVID. So very excited about the operating profit. This is 110% improvement from the previous year, where we made a loss of 5 billion Kenya shillings, now making an operating profit. So operating profit comes out of your operations. Unfortunately, we do have finances. So most of our borrowing is in foreign currency, US dollars. And when you retranslate those borrowings into Kenya shillings and report them, you have to record a forex loss. And that significantly has impacted our bottom line. So if you look at our financing charges, we're talking about 22 billion Kenya shillings. And out of that 22 billion shillings, we have more than 15 billion of forex losses. So really, it's the deterioration of the Kenyan shilling, because it has deteriorated by about 14% since the beginning of the year. And that is significant for us because we are heavy borrowers. And we'll talk about what we need to do going forward so that we don't suffer the same kind of impact on our financials. Yeah,
let's look back in time. I mean, we know what you've attributed the losses to this year. But KQ has been recording losses. How did we get here? Give us, if you can, a summary of how we got to this point.
So KQ has been recording even operating losses. Like I said earlier, for the first time, it is recording an operating profit. I think we should celebrate that. So we Kenyans should learn to celebrate success. And this is success for us for the first time. Yes, for the longest time, we have been recording losses. This time, it's purely because of finance charges and forex losses. In the past, it was many operational challenges. Now, if I summarize it, because it's complicated, but I can try and summarize it and make it simple. Kenya Airways went into an expansion spree in about 2009. We crafted something called Project Mawingu. Project Mawingu was a fantastic project of expansion. And so to execute Project Mawingu, the company needed to borrow heavily. Okay, they either needed to get more equity or borrow. So they chose to borrow. So the borrowing was about $1.2 billion US dollars of borrowing at that time. And then the Murphy Law happened. What could go wrong went wrong. We had between 2012 and 2015, there was a Westgate attack. So there was advisories against us. There was Garissa attack, advisories against us. There was the airport fire. There was then what converged also was Ebola epidemic, on top of which there was the increase of frequencies of Middle East carriers, because that's when they ramped up into Nairobi. So all those factors converged into what was supposed to be an expansion plan and heavy borrowing. And so the revenues that were supposed to come out of the expansion didn't actually happen. And so, of course, at that point, we started suffering losses, and it has never recovered since then.
And what have you been doing since then? I know, Project Mawingu was about the aircraft. So tell us about now the plan to get ourselves out of that situation. So
we have to take a break because a certain thing happened in 2020, if you remember, called COVID, which was quite significant for Kenya Airways and for many airlines around the world. That almost brought us to our knees. So we had to, first of all, recover from the COVID pandemic. And recovering from that took us time. Of course, we got a lot of support from the government of Kenya, which we were very grateful for because we had grounded our aircraft for more than 6 months. So we had to get out of COVID, stabilize operations, and then we came up with a project, a restructuring project called Project Kifaru. Okay, people ask me why we like this project, but it's important for us. So we identify what is going to get us out of this issue. So this Project Kifaru, the point was, first of all, to stabilize operations. We looked at the business, we looked at the network, we looked at the fleet, we looked at all the frequencies, we looked at the cost structure. The idea was to optimize all that so that it's fit for purpose. So we shrank a lot. We did away with excess, particularly the fleet, costs, and even some of the staff. Okay, we retired some people early and so on and so forth. That to make sure that we survived for the short run. And we have a project, Project Kifaru is supposed to take 36 months. We are halfway through that. We've implemented a lot of the things. So for example, we've done a lot of fleet rationalization. We've done a lot of cost out initiatives. We're okay from that front. Now we're going to we call it the second phase, which is more stabilized growth. And also we need to restructure the balance sheet. Okay, and again, I can talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Let's talk about the bailout, because you've mentioned it as one of the key paths to recovery. And I know you've heard of the conversations that are taking place both in the financial circles as well as on the political front, because, you know, KQ is a matter of national interest. Allan, why should the Kenya government continue to bail out Kenya Airways? Okay.
So first of all, Yvonne, if you allow me to clarify, because, you know, sometimes bailout sounds like a grant. It sounds like government is just throwing money and that money will never come back. In actual fact, government is lending to Kenya Airways because it's a shareholder's loan. And so that money will be paid back. At the moment, government charges interest on the shareholder loan. And so we are accruing the interest until a point at which we will start paying back the loan. Mm-hmm. So it's a shareholder loan. Yes, it's a bailout, but it's a support from a shareholder perspective. It's not a grant. Secondly, you said, why should the government continue supporting? The government, Kenyans, Africans, because we are an African carrier, customers should continue supporting the airline because the airline is important and it's critical for the economy of this country. Let me give you some examples. So airlines typically play a very catalytic role when it comes to economic development. A good example is Dubai. Without Emirates, Dubai will never be Dubai. And without Dubai, Emirates will not be Emirates. You can think of Singapore Airlines, for instance. Same thing. Those particular airlines play a very important role. In fact, the estimate is about 4% of contribution to the economy. And Kenya Airways plays a similar role. Of course, we can be more efficient. We should be more efficient. But at the same time, we do play a very important role in supporting the economic development in this country. I don't know whether you know that we employ about 4,000 people, for example. Not just that, by extension, that's directly, indirectly, we estimate about 400,000 people because of the multiplier effect. And then on top of which, we support tourism, we support export of goods, and imports of goods as well. We have training, upskilling of staff. We do humanitarian support, and so on and so forth. So from that perspective, it's important. I'm not saying we're too big to fail, but I think we're important enough for us to be supported. And we need to play our part and become more efficient so that we can continue to play effectively our role in the economy.
All right, and the National Treasury has said it's coming up with a financing plan that will see it stop using taxpayers' money to support the operations of KQ, essentially announcing an end to that bailout by December of 2023. That's just a few months away. How do you feel about this, and are you confident that by that time, the support that has been provided so far will now help you in good stead towards your recovery plan?
Yeah. So I need to explain something. When we came up with Project Kifaru, we costed it. How much it was going to cost, how much support it needed from shareholders, from banks, and so on and so forth. Okay? It's not even the period of time that is important, is that that particular funding that is required is in place, whether it is through government, through an external party, through a strategic investor. All that matters is that that financial support is in place. So Yvonne, what is important now that we've demonstrated that we're financially viable, we're making operating profits, and we believe that the second half of this year is going to be stronger than the first half of the year, because typically what we call peak season starts in June and ends in September, and then we have a mini peak season also in December and early November. So we believe the second half is going to be even stronger. So what now is needed for us to be successful and sustainable going forward is for us to restructure the balance sheet, which I said I was going to talk to a little bit more. Yeah. What does that mean? It means that we need to reduce our debt level. We're very heavily leveraged, okay, for the reasons I gave earlier. So we need funding in, and that funding would be either through a strategic investor, which is what we've been looking for, and that process is ongoing actually. When the strategic investor comes and brings in fresh capital, we will be able to retire some of the debt and also use some of that money for expansion. Because we are now looking at turning around the airline, which is important, we also need to look at expansion. Because we need to fly to more places, we need to increase our frequencies, we need to play a bigger role, not just in this country, but in the continent. And we're ready to play that. You know, we're well poised to play that role because of our geoposition, because we have the talent. We're probably the most talented airline in terms of people who work for this airline anywhere in this continent. And I can say that very confidently. We have fantastic engineers, back office staff, pilots are the best. Anybody that you think about from Kenya Airways can work anywhere in the world. So because we have the ingredients for success, what now we need is the funding that will help us to restructure the balance sheet, and therefore I will not come back here talking to you about finance cost and forex losses, but now come and talk to you about we need more money for expansion. All right, that's the better discussion to have.
I want to talk about you were optimistic about a turnaround by 2024. And then there was also the matter when, President Ramaphosa visited the country. There was talk of a partnership with South African Airways. Maybe you could talk to us about that and what the future then looks like, and what for you will be the key for that turnaround that you're hoping for in the coming year.
Yeah. Okay. So very good question. But let me talk about the turnaround first. Then I'll tell you how it links in with the Pan-African Airline Group. So the turnaround is based on stabilization, improvement of operations, and then restructuring the balance sheet. We've done the first two. Now we need to do the last bit, which is restructuring the balance sheet. Okay? So that's well on its way. In fact, we are slightly ahead of our projections. We thought that we would make an operating profit by the end of this year. We've made it by half year. So we're ahead of our projections, and thanks to the Kenya Airways staff. Now, why do we think Pan-African Airline Group is important? The Pan-African Airline Group is important because we need to scale. In aviation, big is beautiful. And by big, we mean big network is beautiful. Because the more places you fly to, the more customers you get. Okay? Because you offer people options. The smaller you are, the uglier you are. Okay? So you need to be beautiful. And there are various ways of becoming beautiful. One way of doing that is through alliances, okay? Because that way you deploy less capital. We had identified some airlines in Africa who we can work together with, South African being one of them. If you look at the positions of Kenya and South Africa, it's a natural fit because South Africa can help us, South African Airlines can help us to cover the Southern Hemisphere. We can cover the East, maybe the North, and some of the West. Okay, so working collaboratively together. And then we had phases through which we would have to go. So we signed an agreement, strategic equity arrangement, investment arrangement, and then now we did code shares, which we're currently working, and they're working very well. And then next now is actually to sign up and see what kind of consolidation do we work. We also had another...
So when can consumers,
we were supposed to do it by the end of this year.
Yeah.
But we need, both of us, South African Airways, Kenya Airways, we need to make sure that we have a strong balance sheet. So the last phase of our restructuring needs to happen, and so does theirs. So that when we come together, we are two beautiful brides coming together and making something beautiful. We also had, we're looking to identify other partners as well, particularly in West Africa, so that we can have a three-hub strategy. Okay, so it's all well in its way, a little bit delayed because of the restructuring delay, But we believe that by end of next year, we'll be discussing a different thing altogether.
Okay, all right. Allan Kilavuka, MD, CEO of Kenya Airways. Thank you. That's all we had time for.
You want us to talk about Delta? Just 1 second.
Yes, go ahead. Talk about Delta. Go for it.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, we talk about alliances.
Yes.
I think one key one that has been, we've talked about and very happy with, is our current codeshare arrangements with Delta. Mm-hmm. Why is this one important? Because you remember in 2018, we started up the New York route. It's taken us a few years to break even. This year, we're going to break even on that route. But now it needs to grow. So coming together with Delta will almost guarantee the profitability of that route. In fact, next month, we will be celebrating 5 years. So after 5 years of flying to New York directly, the only African carrier flying to New York from this part directly, we will be enhancing the route. We are flying daily to New York. We hope to increase that to 9, if possible, if we can get slots.
To 9?
Yes, 9 a week.
9 a week.
Yes.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah, so this partnership with Delta is really going to strengthen that route, because you can fly on a Delta code from anywhere in Africa through Nairobi to anywhere in the US, 51 points, or into Africa, 31 points. So this is an example of how we are thinking differently to expand our network and to grow, not just organically, but also inorganically using partners and alliances.
All right, thank you very much. Allan Kilavuka, who's the MD and CEO of Kenya Airways, hopeful of a turnaround by next year, and speaking to us about the growth expected for the airline. Thank you very much for making the time for us here on Power Talk. That's it.